changes here is going to start to drive our vehicle and simply data log it. Now I'm sitting on the mainline chassis dyno. You do not need to have a chassis dyno to do the tuning process. Specifically, the part throttle process, as I'm going to be outlining right now as we go through the tutorial. It's the very first one we're going to run into. We need to dial in our columns 1 through 7 here. We're going to leave our columns 8, 9, and 10 when we get into the full throttle later in the tutorial. But this is the area where I need to dial in. It's going to be the off idle and in cruise areas of operations. We're going to spend the majority of your time, and you want to make sure that your fuel table is dialed in as best as you possibly can. Now, what we're going to do in order to work with this, in order to make sure that the table is 100% dialed in, we're going to be working in unison to the closed loop. So we're going to log what the closed loop is showing us, and we're going to plot that in a histogram overlay here, and it's going to give us the percentages that we're off by. We're going to use that to be able to edit the table with. So we're going to capture the data log, we're going to allow it to populate in the overlay table, we're going to see how far it's off by. I'm going to show you some quick editing techniques to be able to adjust the table so you can follow along on your car. But one thing we need to do before we populate any data in here is consider the conditions to plot into the histogram. It's super critical to make sure you have good data in, and I'll explain why here in a second. So let me go ahead and key off right now so it's a little bit easier to talk. We don't have to have the engine running. I'm going to first go up here to the top and do upload. We're going to get that out of the way. So we've uploaded the changes we've talked about. And then what we're going to do here is jump into options and then jump into settings. And we're specifically going to look under our Lambda overlay. Now in here, this is going to be what we want for target conditions. So Lambda or air fuel reading, as we're plotting in our window here, what we actually want to have in terms of the values. And that's going to be showing the Lambda overlay, or using the Lambda overlay here. It's going to illustrate if we're at X air fuel that we're saying right here. So high load, 12.5 air fuel above 2 PSI. So we're actually going to say 13.5 to 12.5 above 2 PSI. Let's go and change this to something like 12.8 to 1 air fuel. So we'll say 12.8 to 1 above, let's say, looking at this. Now it's a little bit goofy the way these units are in. I'm going to change these to KPA. So this is saying we want to run 14.7 stoichiometric up to, I'm going to say 80 KPA. And then I'm going to say here, change this to units to KPA. And we'll say we want to be at 12.8 when we're going to be above here, let's say 90 KPA. And that's going to set the overlay conditions here in terms of what it's going to look for the air fuel that we'd like to be at versus what it's actually at, and give us like a calculated difference. So that's what it's going to be plotting in here. This is going to be specifically what we want to worry about at full throttle conditions, some of this programming language. Now the display, Lambda display here, we want to have it toggled on in closed loop apply fuel trims, calculate for each angle, and transition delay of 0.5 seconds. The other thing to consider here in terms of what we want to plot, in terms of our histogram plotting, we want to have throttle minimum 1% to maximum 110. That's going to allow it to start to plot in here. We don't want it 0% throttle. That will start to pull in overrun conditions where we lift throttle. We don't want that data in here. So we want to be at least 1% throttle, gear 1 to 6, cam angle 0 to 55 degrees, map 0 to 500 kPa. We want all of the map sensor readings in terms of the data we want to be able to plot in here. And then the biggest thing here is the number of samples. The more samples we have in here, the more of a filtering effect, and it starts to whittle down the data that it plots in here. You need more samples in a specific cell to populate a value in that cell. The more samples we require, the more averaging effect it's going to take, and the better the data in that cell point will be. So the more accurate it will be to use for editing purposes in our main fuel table. So I'm going to go in here to the number of samples. If I'm considering looking at my part throttle conditions, I'm going to have anywhere between 20 to 50 samples for it to plot into a particular cell point. If I have a very long data log, let's say 10, 20 minutes of driving, I can definitely up the number of samples. Now you can change this later, so you can actually change this after you've already data logged. I'm going to go ahead and set this to, let's just do 30 samples and click OK. And then we can always put a higher number of samples on it to be able to make it harder to plot into each cell point. Again, this is collecting more data in that localized cell point, and that's going to help us weed through sorting out bad data. So specifically transitional type of situations where you start to get on the throttle and it might pick up a slight lean reading from the wideband. If you have the number of samples low, it could actually plot that in a cell point, and that's going to put garbage data in. So if we put bad data in here, we're going to go and follow this and go, oh, we need to go make changes to our fuel table. Something's not right there. So we're going to be more prone or inclined to go and edit the fuel table with bad data, and we don't want to do that. So let's go and flip all the way back in here to our...
Thanks for checking out our teaser clip. If you want to see the rest of this video and more than 500 hours of current EFI training we have to offer, make sure you click right here. If you want to go and check out more teaser clips from this training course, click here, and you don't want to miss any of the videos we're going to be releasing on this channel, so make sure you subscribe and click here. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys later.